I moved into the Riverside Commons townhome complex thinking I had found the perfect balance of suburban quiet and urban convenience. The property backed up to a public park with basketball courts, a playground, and a smooth concrete plaza that had become the unofficial gathering spot for local skateboarders. Most evenings, I'd sit on my back patio with a glass of wine, listening to the rhythmic clatter of wheels on concrete mixed with occasional cheers when someone landed a trick. It was actually kind of peaceful, in an energetic sort of way. The kids were respectful, picked up their trash, and usually cleared out by 8 or 9 in the evening. I'd been living there about 3 months when I first encountered Karen Hutchins at the monthly HOA meeting. She lived in the unit closest to the park entrance, and from the moment she stood up during open comment time, I knew she was going to be a problem. Karen was the type of woman who had clearly peaked as captain of her high school student enforcement committee, and had spent the following 30 years trying to recapture that rush of petty authority. "I want to talk about the skateboarders," Karen announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Every single day, these delinquents are out there making noise, damaging public property, and creating a dangerous environment. I've called the police 17 times in the past month, and they refuse to do anything about it." The HOA president, a tired-looking man named Doug, sighed deeply. "Karen, as we've discussed before, the park is public property. The HOA has no jurisdiction over what happens there." "Then we need to petition the city," Karen snapped. "We need ordinances. We need enforcement. We need those hoodlums arrested." I watched several other residents exchange knowing glances. Apparently, this was not Karen's first crusade. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story of entitled behavior meeting its match, please hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more tales of karmic justice. Your support helps us bring you these satisfying stories of poetic revenge. Now, back to Karen's campaign against teenagers with sporting equipment. Over the following weeks, Karen's obsession with the skateboarders intensified. She started attending city council meetings, circulating petitions, and posting lengthy screeds in the neighborhood Facebook group about the skateboard menace. She took hundreds of photos and videos, documenting every ollie, every kickflip, every moment of what she called reckless endangerment. The irony was that these kids were actually incredibly skilled. I'd done my research after Karen's first outburst. Several of them competed regionally, and 2 were being scouted for sponsorships. They practiced in the park because the nearest official skate park was 40 minutes away. They weren't vandals or troublemakers. They were athletes honing their craft. But Karen didn't see athletes. She saw an opportunity to exercise control, to be the person who solved a problem that only she seemed to perceive. She began showing up at the park herself, standing at the edge of the plaza with her arms crossed, filming the skaters and shouting at them to leave. When they politely explained they had every right to be there, she'd call the police, who would arrive, confirm the kids weren't breaking any laws, and leave. This happened almost daily. Then Karen discovered that while skateboarding itself wasn't illegal in the park, there was technically an ordinance against creating excessive noise after 9 p.m. in residential areas. Never mind that the skaters were always gone by then. Karen began filing formal noise complaints, claiming they were skating until midnight. She'd submit timestamped evidence that turned out to be videos she'd recorded earlier and deliberately mislabeled. When the city started investigating and found her complaints fraudulent, she accused them of corruption and conspiracy. I tried to stay out of it. I really did. This wasn't my fight. I barely knew these kids beyond friendly waves and the occasional compliment when I saw an impressive trick. But Karen's crusade was escalating in ways that were starting to affect everyone. She convinced the HOA to install bright floodlights pointing toward the park, supposedly for security, but really just to harass the skaters. She organized a phone tree to have multiple residents file noise complaints simultaneously, hoping to trigger some kind of enforcement threshold. She even hired a lawyer to explore whether the HOA could sue the city to ban skateboarding in the park. That's when she made her first mistake involving me directly. Karen apparently decided that since I had a patio facing the park, I must be disturbed by the skating. Without asking my permission, she listed me as a co-complainant on one of her petitions to the city. I only found out when I received a letter from the Parks and Recreation Department asking me to provide testimony about the ongoing disturbance I'd reportedly experienced. I immediately contacted the city to explain I'd never filed a complaint and had no issue with the skaters. Then I went to Karen's door. "You need to remove my name from your petition," I told her calmly. "I didn't consent to be listed, and I don't agree with your complaint." Karen looked at me like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. "You can't possibly support those delinquents. The noise, the liability, the property values. They're kids skateboarding in a public park," I said. "It's legal, it's harmless, and frankly, I enjoy watching them. Remove my name." "Well," Karen sniffed, "I suppose some people have no standards for their living environment. Don't come crying to me when one of them crashes through your window, or when your townhome value drops because this complex becomes known as next to the skateboard slum." I walked away, but Karen wasn't done with me. Over the next week, I started finding HOA violation notices on my door. My patio furniture was not in compliance with community aesthetic standards. My doormat was unapproved colors. I was storing items visible from the street, which referred to a small package delivery box. Every single citation was petty, technical, and clearly retaliatory. When I checked the actual HOA bylaws, most of her claims were either misinterpretations or outright fabrications. I responded formally to each one, citing the specific bylaw language that proved I was in compliance. Karen escalated to attending HOA board meetings specifically to propose new rules that would target me. She wanted to ban all patio furniture except approved models, require pre-authorization for any deliveries, and institute community appearance inspections, where she would personally tour the property photographing violations. The board, to their credit, shot down most of her proposals, but the harassment continued. Meanwhile, her campaign against the skateboarders reached new levels of absurdity. She started showing up at the park with a decibel meter, trying to prove the skating exceeded noise ordinances. When the measurements consistently showed levels well below any threshold, she claimed the meter was defective and bought a more expensive one. Same results. She then pivoted to arguing that skateboarding constituted destruction of public property, because the concrete showed marks from the wheels and occasional wax residue from grinding. She took macro photographs of these damages and presented them to the city council in a 40-slide presentation. The city engineer had to gently explain that minor surface wear was normal and expected in a public park, and that the concrete was actually designed to withstand far more intensive use. Karen accused him of incompetence and demanded he be fired. What pushed me from annoyed bystander to active participant was the incident with Tyler. Tyler was 16, one of the most talented skaters in the group, and one of the kindest kids I'd ever encountered. He'd helped me carry groceries when he saw me struggling with too many bags. He always picked up any litter he saw, even stuff that wasn't his. He was exactly the kind of teenager you'd want in your community. Karen decided he was the ringleader. She began following him specifically, filming him constantly, and posting videos online with captions about dangerous criminal activity. She showed up at his high school to file a complaint with the principal, claiming Tyler was organizing gang activity in the park. She contacted companies whose stickers appeared on his skateboard, trying to get him dropped from amateur sponsorship consideration by making false allegations about his character. When Tyler's parents confronted her about the harassment, she filed a restraining order request against them, claiming they threatened her. The request was denied immediately, but the process was stressful and expensive for the family. That's when I decided Karen needed to learn a lesson about consequences. You see, what Karen didn't know about me was that before I'd semi-retired to consulting work, I'd spent 15 years as a corporate attorney specializing in liability and risk management. I'd also done very well for myself through a combination of smart investments and being in the right place when a startup I'd advised got acquired for a substantial sum. I had resources, knowledge, and most importantly, patience. I started by doing what I do best, thorough research. I pulled every piece of public documentation I could find on Karen. Court records, property records, business filings, everything. I discovered that Karen had a history of this kind of behavior. She'd been involved in multiple legal disputes with neighbors at her previous residence, mostly involving spurious complaints and attempts to weaponize local ordinances. She'd actually been countersued twice for harassment, settling both times with sealed agreements. She had a pattern, and that pattern was exploitable. Then I researched the park itself. Riverside Park was city property, maintained by the Parks and Recreation Department. However, I discovered something interesting in the historical records. The plaza area where the kids skated had actually been built 15 years ago, with a specific grant meant to provide youth recreational facilities. The grant documentation explicitly mentioned skateboarding as one of the intended uses. There were even architectural drawings showing features designed to be skateboard-friendly, intentionally smooth surfaces and particular edge treatments. Over the years, this original intent had been somewhat forgotten, but it was all there in the public record. This gave me an idea. I reached out to some of my old professional contacts, including a friend who worked in municipal planning. Through a series of casual conversations, I learned that the city had recently allocated budget for park improvements and was actively seeking community input on how to use those funds. There was a formal process for proposing projects, and if a proposal met certain criteria and had community support, it could be fast-tracked. I spent a weekend drafting a comprehensive proposal for the city to officially designate the plaza as a community skate spot and make improvements to support the use. Better lighting, some basic skatable features like rails and ledges, signage with rules and safety information, and maybe some benches for spectators. I estimated the cost at around $75,000. Then I made some calls. I contacted a national skateboarding advocacy organization that provided grants for exactly this kind of project. I reached out to several of the skaters' parents and got their enthusiastic support. I connected with local youth organizations. Within 2 weeks, I had a coalition of supporters, pledges for matching funds, and a meeting scheduled with the Parks and Recreation Director. The director loved the proposal. It addressed a real need, had community backing, matched the park's original intent, and a significant portion of the funding was already secured through grants and private donations. The private donations part was easy. I wrote a check for $25,000 myself. The proposal went to the city council for approval. This was a public process, which meant Karen found out about it. She showed up at the council meeting, naturally, armed with her binders of evidence about why skateboarding should be banned, not encouraged. She gave an impassioned speech about property values, safety concerns, and the moral decay of society. Then it was my turn to speak. I calmly presented the facts. The park's original design intent. The lack of any actual safety incidents in the years the kids had been skating there. The positive impact of providing youth recreational facilities. The economic benefit of keeping kids engaged in healthy activities. I had letters of support from teachers, coaches, and local business owners. I had architectural renderings showing how attractive the improved space would be. I had data on how similar projects in other cities had actually increased property values by creating vibrant community spaces. The council voted 5-2 in favor. Karen was livid. But here's where things got really interesting. As part of the approval process, the city conducted a formal review of all previous complaints related to the park. They discovered Karen's pattern of false noise complaints, fabricated timestamps, and fraudulent co-signing of others' names on petitions. The city attorney sent her a formal letter warning that further false reports could result in charges for filing false police reports and misuse of city resources. Karen, of course, saw this as persecution. She doubled down, claiming the city was corrupt and I had bribed officials. She started a new petition to recall the city council members who'd voted for the skate spot. She showed up at the park daily, screaming at the kids that their illegal skate park would never be built, that she'd stop it, that she'd have every one of them arrested. That's when Karen crossed the line from annoying to criminal. The construction for the skate spot improvements was scheduled to begin on a Monday morning. The previous Friday night, the city received a call about suspicious activity at the park. When police arrived, they found Karen in the plaza area after dark, pouring motor oil across the concrete surface. She'd brought multiple containers and had already contaminated a significant area. When officers asked what she was doing, she explained that she was making the surface unusable for skateboards, and that once the city saw how dangerous it was, they'd have to cancel the project. The officers arrested her on the spot. She was charged with vandalism of public property, creating a public hazard, and criminal mischief. The motor oil had to be professionally cleaned up, costing the city nearly $8,000. The city promptly filed a civil suit against Karen to recover the cleanup costs and the delays to the construction schedule. But it got worse for Karen. Because the incident happened on video, recorded by the park security cameras that had been installed months earlier, there was crystal clear evidence of her actions. The video also showed this wasn't her first visit with supplies. She'd apparently been planning various sabotage attempts. Cameras caught her on previous nights examining the construction staging area and apparently trying to figure out how to damage equipment. When police searched her home pursuant to the criminal case, they found detailed plans for other sabotage ideas. Bags of concrete mix she planned to dump in wet cement. Spray paint to vandalize the new features. Even a plan to file false injury claims by deliberately hurting herself at the site and blaming faulty construction. The evidence was so overwhelming that her lawyer advised her to accept a plea deal. She pled guilty to felony vandalism and was sentenced to 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, full restitution for all damages, and a permanent ban from Riverside Park. The civil suit was settled with Karen agreeing to pay an additional $15,000 in damages and administrative costs. The skate spot opened 3 months later. It was beautiful, professionally designed features, excellent lighting, a welcoming community space. Tyler and his friends were there opening day, and the joy on their faces was worth every hour I'd put into the project. Local news covered it as a positive story about community investment in youth. A regional skateboarding magazine featured it. Kids from surrounding areas started coming to skate there, all respectful and following the posted rules. But my favorite part was what happened with the HOA. Once Karen had a criminal record for vandalism, several residents who'd been quietly enduring her harassment for years suddenly felt empowered to speak up. It turned out Karen had been abusing her position as an HOA busybody to torment multiple neighbors with frivolous violations and threats. With her credibility destroyed, the board formally barred her from filing any more complaints without corroboration from other residents. They also passed new bylaws limiting how many violations any single person could report per month, specifically to prevent weaponization of HOA rules. Karen's house went up for sale within 6 months. apparently living next to the illegal skate park that had not only been built but expanded beyond her worst nightmares, while being banned from ever setting foot in it, while her neighbors openly celebrated its existence, while watching the property values actually increase because families wanted to live near the youth facilities. It was all too much for her. The day the for sale sign went up, I was sitting on my patio as usual. Tyler skated over to the fence. "Hey, did you see Karen's moving?" he called up. "I did," I replied. "Guess she finally found some standards for her living environment," he said with a grin. I couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving people what they say they want. Karen wanted attention paid to the skateboarders. She got it, in the form of a permanent, city-sanctioned facility. She wanted enforcement of rules and consequences for rule breaking. She got it when she became subject to criminal prosecution for her own illegal actions. She wanted the community to take a stand. We did, just not the stand she expected. The final twist came about a year later. The skate spot had been such a success that a sporting goods company approached the city about sponsoring a regional youth skateboarding competition to be held at Riverside Park. The event would bring in hundreds of participants and spectators, generate revenue for local businesses, and put our little community on the map in the skateboarding world. The city council unanimously approved it. The event was scheduled for June, prime skateboarding weather. I volunteered to help with organization, naturally. Tyler qualified to compete in the advanced division. The weekend of the competition, I was working the registration table when I saw a familiar car slow down on the street bordering the park. Karen, apparently driving by her old neighborhood, had stumbled onto the event. I watched her face through the windshield as she took in the scene. Hundreds of people, professional event banners, vendor tents, a massive crowd cheering for skaters, using the features of the facility she tried so hard to prevent. A facility that now bore a small plaque thanking various donors and supporters, including my name prominently listed. Local news cameras were filming. The mayor was giving an interview about community investment. Children were laughing, parents were smiling, and the property values of every townhome in Riverside Commons had increased by an average of 8% according to recent assessments, directly attributed to the desirable park amenities. Karen's expression went through several stages: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, pure horror as she understood the full scope of what had happened. She hadn't just lost her crusade against the skateboarders. Her harassment and illegal actions had directly catalyzed the creation of something far bigger than the informal skating that had bothered her in the first place. She'd turned a handful of kids casually practicing tricks into a city landmark and regional competition venue. Her name was now permanently associated in local records with the vandalism incident that had delayed but ultimately publicized the project, generating even more support. Every single thing she tried to prevent had come true in magnified form, and it was entirely, completely, ironically her own fault. I gave her a friendly wave as her car sat there, frozen in traffic. She didn't wave back. If you enjoyed this tale of spectacular backfire and poetic justice, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Karen E. World. We've got plenty more stories where entitled behavior meets its perfect match. Drop a comment about your own Karen encounters. We love hearing your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best way to deal with a Karen is to give them exactly what they're asking for.